Snowpiercer Season 1 just finished up, so I decided to rewatch the movie. Hey everyone, this is Scott from Forgot to Grow Up. Welcome to our latest ReWatch, ReVisit review, our series where I rewatch a movie I haven't seen in a while, talk about my thoughts after revisiting it, and then give you my review as well as the critics and audience review for the movie. So today I'm talking about Snowpiercer, the movie from 2014 starring Chris Evans, the movie that the recent TV series was based on, which the movie is based on a French book, I believe, or French comic book called something transporte or something like that. But the point is that I decided to rewatch it because I just finished watching the first season, which is a prequel that takes place 10 years, I recently learned, before this movie takes place. So this movie takes place in 2031, 17 years after an experiment went wrong. In a sense, the whole world was dealing with climate change, and they decided to release this experimental chemical called CW7, which ends up backfiring and freezing the whole world. And only one guy apparently foresaw this coming, who had built a train track system that looped around the whole world because he really liked trains. And that train was called Snowpiercer. So yes, the movie follows the class divide that goes on on Snowpiercer 17 years after it's been launched, and we see this revolution in the tail sections. We follow this revolution that starts in the tail section as they try to take over the train and get a more equitable place on Snowpiercer. And the whole theme is about, it being an ecosystem and about this balance that has to be maintained, or at least that's what the people in the, the nicer positions, the people in first class and etc. At least that's what they try to tell everybody in the rear. So I really enjoyed revisiting this, mainly because I remembered so very little about this movie. Like, I remembered the basics of, there's a tail section the tail section is the lower class, is in a sense, and they're, been abused and aren't being treated the same way as everyone else, and so they obviously want to revolt eventually so that they can be treated just like everybody else on the train. And so I did remember that basic premise, but all the details that go into it I had forgotten. One of the cool things was I was noticing all the similarities between the movie and the TV show, obviously them being connected, but seeing the things that they made sure to keep, things like freezing people's arms off as punishment and stuff like that. And so I really enjoyed revisiting it and discovering these little the similarities between between the movie and the TV show after having just finished watching the first season of the TV show. So it was really enjoyable revisit. I rewatched it on Amazon Prime. I had to get a Stars subscription because it's either that or iTunes. Otherwise, you can't really find it here in Canada to rent. It's not even on Google Play, which is where I normally rent stuff. So that was a little bit of a pain to get to watching it, but it was worth revisiting. It was really enjoyable, and I can see why this is a movie that then sparked a TV show to be spun off of it, and why, because it's such a great world, such a great premise of this train that has to, this humanity being stuck on this train, or the last of humanity to be stuck on this train that has to, and trying to overcome the problems that incur. So I really enjoyed revisiting this. So yeah, so my review for this would be definitely a 2 thumbs up. I really enjoyed it. The part that surprised me even more is when I like these types of sci-fi, kind of not, I like to think of them as not normal people and stuff, but that's just a, thing from back when nerdy stuff wasn't as popular. But that being said, I wasn't expecting this to have such a high rating on Rotten Tomatoes from their critics. The Rotten Tomato critics give it a 94%, and the audiences only give it a 72%, which is a little surprising for me, but I can also see why. I really enjoyed it, and it's nice to see that, that critics do appreciate it too, and that fans or audiences, I guess, weren't as receptive as critics. And one of the things I saw that critics said was that they just were happy to see an action film that wasn't so heavily relying on it being a CGI fest, even though there's a lot of CGI in this, but that's for the surroundings, for your to seeing the outside world, the frozen world. They're not using it to see the action. The action is very raw, very gory, very just it's just very intense. So I could see why I enjoyed it, and I definitely see why critics enjoyed this versus a lot of the action films we got at the time. This came on 2014, but even today, we have made a little bit of a switch, but I'd say this still is in its own kind of category of action action sci-fi movie. So I really enjoyed revisiting it, and I'm really glad that I took the time to rewatch, revisit, review it. But if you're curious about more of my thoughts on Snowpiercer, be sure to check out my Snowpiercer playlist, which I've linked at the end of the video. If you're curious about more of my thoughts on rewatch, revisit, reviews, be sure to check out that playlist, which I've also linked at the end of the video. But thanks again for joining me today. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Have a good one.